Dear participants, welcome to this webinar about WaterLOUPE, the water scarcity dashboard. Good afternoon or good morning for the many of you that joined us from the other side of the Atlantic. My name is Sophie Vermoten, the host of this webinar. My fellow presenters are Vetri Dagomoudi from Kimberly-Clark on the left. He's joining us from Atlanta in the US. And Dimi Hendricks from Deltares on the right, sitting in a room next door here in the Netherlands. Just before we start, I would like to share with you some technicalities with respect to the webinar. If you wish, you can during the next hour send us questions. Just type in your questions here in this pane on the right side of your screen and submit it to us. The questions we assess as relevant to all participants will be dealt with in the last part of the webinar. Other questions will be answered later through email. To increase interaction with you, we will ask you 2 questions in a poll. You will see a blue screen popping up on your screen. Please click the correct answer and submit it. I will guide you through it when we are there. Finally, during the Q&A part of the session, at the end of the webinar, you'll be able to raise your virtual hand by clicking on this button here. This one. Please don't use that button too often. If later on you would like to contact us, please do not hesitate to email us at waterloupe@deltares.nl. I will share the email address in my last slide. Please finally note that the webinar will be recorded and published on our website without the Q&A part of the webinar. Today, we will start with Vetri, who will introduce the initiative from the perspective of Kimberly-Clark. Then, I will take over to introduce the dashboard and explain our plans with respect to the further development of the tool. After that, Dimi will give a demonstration of WaterLOUPE, showing the capabilities of the tool so you can have a first impression of its strength and help us shape the future of the dashboard. In the final 15 minutes, we will answer questions with our panel of experts, all of whom have been involved in the development of the dashboard. You can take over, Vetri.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. Good morning, everyone. I'm Vetri Dagomoudi. I lead the Global Water Program at Kimberly-Clark, and I've been working with Deltares team to develop WaterLOUPE from concept development to testing and engaging the local community to gather data and insights. And who is Kimberly-Clark? Kimberly-Clark is a 146 years old company which manufactures personal hygiene products with 43,000 employees worldwide. We operate in 35 countries with sales in over 175 countries. Our portfolio of products are Huggies, Scott, Kleenex, Cottonelle, Kotex, and in 2017, our sales revenue was about $18.3 billion. So water. Today I'm going to talk about some facts and trends of global water issues. Most of us know water is essential for health and social and economic development. Yet millions of people worldwide do not have access to clean, safe water. Combination of climate change and population growth is threatening our water supplies. About 2.1 billion people today lack access to safely managed drinking water services. The UN predicts that by 2025, about 3.5 billion people will live in water scarce or water stressed areas, which is up from 1 billion people in 2005. World Economic Forum is consistently ranking water as one of the top global risks. And per the recent UN report, 3 out of 4 jobs are water dependent. And we are consistently seeing this increasing public pressure on consumer brands and brand reputation risk, which leads to loss of social license to operate. And as we all know, there's a limited supply of water, so there's a competing resources or competition for water resources. So water basin challenge. As a significant water users or water user in a water basin, from our perspective, water is a key input to our operations. Preserving water resources is both an environmental and business priority for us. On the production side, we're focused on reducing water use, improving wastewater treatment, and increasing recycling of water within a production process. We understand that decreasing water use in our mills is only part of the solution. We need to engage our local stakeholders, including government, industrial, agriculture users, and communities to develop total strategies for sustainable management of local water resources. And there are a few challenges as we see in the water basin is that visibility to local data and to identify key issues in the water basin. And who is the leader of the collective action to mitigate the specific water risk associated in the basin? Stakeholder engagement is one of the challenges we see. And the last one is measuring and monitoring of the basin intervention impact is one of the big challenges we see in the water basin. So why WaterLOUPE? Kimberly-Clark's water risk management strategy has been largely focused on conservation and reductions in water use in our mills. However, we have learned a watershed approach is needed to address the challenge of water security. For example, even if KC reduces the mill's water consumption, we could still be forced to shut down if the community isn't also taking action. Kimberly-Clark and Deltares developed the WaterLOUPE, which is an innovative tool to share data and insights on current and future risks to local water resources and raise stakeholder awareness of water risk at the local level and to encourage collaboration in developing sustainable water management plans. So there's a question, what's the difference between WaterLOUPE? As a company, we've used the tools like WRI Aqueduct and WWF Water Risk Filter. We see that being a first step for us to look into what is the water risk associated, and WaterLOUPE being the next step in the process to really understand the local data perspective. WaterLOUPE presents data on hydrology, exposure, and vulnerability at local level using local data. So the public and private sector can use this tool to engage local stakeholder groups to drive collective action for sustainable water stewardship in the river basin. With this, I pass on to Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you, Vetri, for sharing your vision from the perspective of Kimberly-Clark. At this moment, if you have any question, please use the field on your right side and submit your question to us. We'll look into it later. This is Sophie again. In the picture, you see that I'm sitting on my natural habitat, which is rocks. I'm a hydrogeologist working on groundwater and water resources related projects. For this WaterLOUPE, I'm the project leader at Deltares. I would like now to share with you why we started this collaboration with Kimberly-Clark and what are current and future plans with respect to the development of the dashboard. We're almost ready to show you the dashboard, but first let me tell you why we started this. What is Deltares? For those of you who have not met us before, Deltares is an independent institute for applied research in the field of water, subsurface, and infrastructure. We are a not-for-profit organization based in the Netherlands and working at the national and international level. We have a long-lasting expertise on water management, floods, as well as water shortage. In fact, Deltares is a merge of 4 much older organizations which have been working on the topic of water since the 1930s, often for and with the public sector, development banks, NGOs, and the private sector. For example, in 2017, Deltares, together with other organizations, created a Water, Peace and Security initiative with the support from the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs, The role of Deltares in this initiative is to analyze satellite data, develop global seasonal water shortage applications, and conduct detailed analysis using open data. This to support concrete actions to prevent water-induced conflict. So why this initiative? Social, economic developments, more people living in river basins, and climate change have an important impact on the water resources and the natural cycle of water, leading to too little, too much, and too dirty water. It is becoming essential to be aware of changes in our environment and to understand these changes in order to act in a sustainable way. As we heard, for corporates like Kimberly-Clark, it is also important to be prepared for changes with respect to, for example, water supply, and to engage with all stakeholders to jointly identify how to best address these challenges. Today, Deltares is aiming to play an active role in supporting businesses in their challenge to cope with water scarcity risks, but also flood and water quality risks. And this is why we developed WaterLOUPE. And now to our first poll. We are curious to know why you, our audience of today, decided to participate to the webinar. Could you please select one of the 5 options on your screen and submit your answer? And the options are: you are a researcher or a data analyst, you are a water steward or a corporate social responsibility manager, you are an operational manager or an executive, you are an investor or a foundation, or you are none of the above. I will now click on the poll and you will see this blue screen appear. Yes, so I give you a few seconds to answer. We have at this moment 84 people voting. We're almost there. 90 people voted. I think I will start giving the results. With 92 people, I think that's good enough to share the results. Share. We have at this point 32% of the attendees, researchers, 25% water steward or corporate social responsibility managers, 12% operational manager. We have 0% investor or people from foundations, and then 32% none of the above, which I'm curious who those are, but let's go further for now. So how did we do it? From the start, we collaborated intensively with Kimberly-Clark to define what questions corporates are dealing with when it comes to the water risks they experience. For them, engaging with actor groups in the basins where they are active is key to establish a good water stewardship. From the various water risks that are experienced by corporates like flood, water quality, or water governance risks, we decided to first focus on the water scarcity risks. Why was that? Because it was a risk that was perceived as important through the assessment at the global level on all the males of Kimberly-Clark. In that first global assessment, the aqueduct tool developed by the World Resource Institute was used. Kimberly-Clark chose 2 males in Colombia as cases to start a local assessment for water risks, engaging with the stakeholders in the area and taking the water risks, as we call it, under the loop, as you can see in the map. Our common aim was to develop a local tool to address the water scarcity risks at that level. Last year, in 2017, we first focused on assessing the present and the future water scarcity risks for different actor groups. To look into the future, we selected several storylines specific to those areas. These are combinations of climate change scenarios and shared socio-economic pathways, what we call SSPs. Later, you'll hear more about that in the demonstration. This year, in 2018, we are focusing on the next step. What strategies can stakeholders in a watershed apply, and what is the expected impact? Again, depending on different future storylines. This is a work in progress, and also a topic we are curious to know how you, our audience of today, is looking at. In this collaboration between Kimberly-Clark and Deltares, it was and still is important to stick to the motto we wrote down for ourselves at the beginning of the project. And that motto is simplifying without compromising in terms of the content. As a research institute, we love to dig into complex questions and dive into the content to fully understand and solve the problem. However, in this corporation, it is essential that we translate the knowledge in an understandable way so that water stewards, among others, can act upon. And we think that is the main challenge of this project. And for that, our collaboration with Kimberly-Clark is essential. So what about the long term? In the future, our ambition is to expand our local tooling by designing a water loop that focuses on flood risks or water quality. But we are curious to know more about your needs. We love to develop other pilots and have more impact. For now, we decided to make the story on the water scarcity risks complete, as I explained before, starting from the risk assessment to strategies, to impact of those strategies, and to monitoring of that impact. In this process, we believe that it's important to engage with additional organizations like you to bring WaterLOUPE further. And now to our second poll. I think you'll know the drill now. I will ask you the following question. If you like what you see in the demo, would you like to engage with us? 1, by endorsing the initiative. 2, by supplying data. 3, by co-creating further developments of the dashboard. 4, financially, by donation or kind of investment. Or 5, none of the above. Unfortunately, I don't have an option for all of the above. Let me start the second poll. Here it comes. We have almost 80% voted. 81%. I think 83. I think I will share the results. So these are the results. We have about 32% who would like to endorse the initiative, 8% supplying data, 50% be involved in co-creation of the tool, 2% financially, and 9% none of the above. Thank you so much for your participation in the poll and your feedback. And now to the part of the webinar where you have all been waiting for, the demonstration. I'm now handing over to Demi.
Thank you, Sophie. Hello, everybody. My name is Demi Hendricks. I'm working at Deltares as a geohydrologist, and I'm a specialist on drought and water scarcity issues. I think my interest for drought and water scarcity started already during my high school period. Having courses about Morocco and its ancient water systems, I became intrigued by water-scarce areas and how societies can thrive and survive here. At Deltares, I have the opportunity to work on these issues. During this project, I'm in the lead for the development of the WaterLOUPE water scarcity dashboard. In the next 15 minutes, I will show you the WaterLOUPE and how it can help you and other water users to assess drought risks at the local scale. I will start with some information about the urgency, the local urgency for building WaterLOUPE, then explain the dashboard in more detail, and finally I present a use case that shows how stakeholders can apply WaterLOUPE. Next slide, please. Everybody needs water. Water is for all. All stakeholders located in water-stressed areas share the basin and the water security risk together. The following quotes illustrate the urgency of the different water users in water-stressed areas. Farmers may ask the following question. I want to share a farm in this watershed. What is the risk of water scarcity here? Next slide, please. A major finds water availability very important for the citizens and businesses in his city. He needs to know if there are any water scarcity risks that threaten the citizens now or in the future. A manager of an industrial plant may think, we share the watershed and the water scarcity risk with other water users here. How can we cooperate to solve the rising risks? The different water users all have an interest in reducing the water scarcity risks in a watershed. And the collective action is needed, as Vetri said, to solve these rising water risks. This way, potential impact on businesses, communities, and societal values can perhaps be mitigated. Next slide, please. For this purpose, WaterLOUPE was developed. The dashboard provides information about water scarcity hazards and risks at the watershed level, based on scientific evidence using a combination of local data and large-scale models, to stimulate public participation and stakeholder involvement on these topics. WaterLOUPE can, for instance, be used during workshops or working sessions with multiple stakeholders. For this purpose, all information needs to be visualized in a logical and clear way in the dashboard. With WaterLOUPE, we aim to provide a knowledge base for all beneficial users, so that they can assess the risks and opportunities related to the water use and water availability in their watershed or region. As a test case, 2 river catchments in Colombia were selected. For these catchments, Kimberly-Clark observed high water scarcity risks during their global assessments. To start, workshops were being held with multiple stakeholders in these watersheds. The information that came out of these workshops has helped us greatly to fine-tune the content of WaterLOUPE. Also, the participants shared with us their ideas on how to visualize a water risk dashboard. Which elements need to be included to make it useful? For them, it was important that the visualization is logical and that the information is available for all water users at the watershed scale separately. Also, the stakeholders expressed that for them it is very helpful and perhaps even a basic requirement that the methods and data sources behind WaterLOUPE can be easily traced and understood. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, I present to you the WaterLOUPE dashboard for water scarcity. What I think is really great about this dashboard is the fact that it visualizes all aspects of water scarcity risk in one view. In the middle part of WaterLOUPE, information about the state of the basin or watershed is provided, water use, water availability, and the water gap hazard. Basically, a water gap occurs when the water demand of all users in a watershed is higher than the availability of renewable water resources. To the left, information about exposure and vulnerability of the different water users can be observed. And to the right, information about what the scarcity risks of different user groups can be seen. The risk indicators are a product of the water gap hazard in the watershed and the exposure and vulnerability indicators. All risk information is provided for multiple watersheds and water users separately. both for the current situation and for future scenarios, including climate change and socio-economic developments. This way, the WaterLOUPE users can not only observe where and when water scarcity risk occurs in their watershed, they can also investigate the origin of the risk. In addition, they can not only see if they are at risk themselves, but also if other users are at risk. In the next slides, I will show you more of how WaterLOUPE works. The dashboard is interactive. In the top left part of the dashboard, the user can make several choices that determine which information is shown. Language preference, watershed of interest, future scenarios, and the time horizon of interest. At the moment, 1 climate scenario, 2 socio-economic scenarios, and 3 time horizons are included in WaterLOUPE. At the top of the hazard part of WaterLOUPE, information can be obtained about the water demand and water availability for the wet and dry season separately, now and in the future. Water demand, in the bar plot at the left, is split in the main sectors: drinking water, agriculture, and industry. Water resources, in the bar plot at the right, is split in surface water and groundwater resources. At the bottom of the hazard part, information can be obtained about the water gap. The left graph shows the total annual water demand and water resources, as well as the total water resources in dry seasons. Basically, when the red line is above the green or blue line, a water gap occurs. The color bar below the graph provides the water gap frequency, the number of months in a specific year during which a water gap occurs. The graph at the right provides information about the frequency of the water gap as well, but in a different way. It shows the frequency of monthly water gaps over a 10-year period for each month of the year separately. So you can see how prone a specific month is to drought and water scarcity. In the left part of the dashboard, information about exposure and vulnerability is provided in a tabular format for the different time horizons. Exposure is expressed with indicators like GDP, percentage areas of main land use types, and population. Vulnerability is expressed with indicators like GDP per capita and poverty indices. Below the tables, the WaterLOUPE provides space for a short description of the main characteristics of the area. At the right side of the dashboard, information about the water scarcity risk is provided. In the top part, the water scarcity risk for the various water users is presented in a tabular format. The information is sub-catchment specific or watershed specific, and for the future, the information is scenario specific. The risk level is presented in 10 categories by colors going from low risk, green, to very high risk, red. In the bottom part, the water scarcity risk for the various sectors and water users is presented as a map showing all watersheds in the catchment. By clicking at the drop-down menu at the right, the different sectors and water users can be selected. Also here, the risk level in the maps is presented in 10 categories by colors, corresponding to the categories and colors in the risk table above. Also, the exposure and vulnerability indicators of the different sectors and users can be viewed on the map by selecting these options in the drop-down menu. Maybe give it one more click. Yeah, these options. To view the map for a specific scenario and time horizon, the interactive buttons at the top left part of the dashboard can be used. Okay. Finally, the dashboard provides conclusions about the water scarcity risks in the area, as well as recommendations focusing on generic risk mitigation options. Currently, general conclusions and recommendations are available, as well as sector-specific recommendations for industrial, agricultural, and urban water users. Okay, so far for the details of the WaterLOUPE dashboard. I will now guide you through an actual use case of WaterLOUPE for an urban area in Colombia that suffers from periodical water scarcity. Here you see an image of the city of Cali. located in the northwest of the Cauca catchment in Colombia. Although Cali receives sufficient water year-round and even suffers from inundations occasionally, dry seasons can be long and can cause water scarcity issues for its citizens. The mayor of Cali may need advice on the issue of water scarcity. His question is, are there any water scarcity risks that can threaten the citizens of Cali? To answer his question, we can use WaterLOUPE. First, click at the Cali subcatchment button to select the watershed of interest. Then choose the scenario and time horizon of interest. To start with 2015, the current situation can be selected. In addition, select the user group of interest in the drop-down menu right of the map. In this case, we focus on poor households. From the map, it is directly visible that the risk for poor citizens in Cali is very high. Also in other watersheds, citizens are at risk of water scarcity. The risk table shows this too, and reveals that for non-poor households, water scarcity risk is low. That's the line below poor households. The water gap information in the middle part of the dashboard shows that the water gap in Cali is limited. At a yearly basis and in the dry season, a water gap does not often occur. In addition, there are no months with a very high water gap frequency. Then why are the poor households in Cali at risk of water scarcity? WaterLOUPE shows us that there are two reasons for this. First, the water use in this watershed is dominated by drinking water use, as can be seen in the bar plot at the top. As a result, a dry season mainly impacts the drinking water sector. Secondly, the high vulnerability of citizens is an important cause of the high risk. The high vulnerability can be observed from the tables at the left side of the dashboard and in the map at the right side by selecting vulnerability indicators in the drop-down menu. The citizens in Cali themselves may be worried as well about the dry periods and wonder if their problems with obtaining drinking water will increase in the future. To answer this question with WaterLOUPE, first click at the Cali subcatchment button to select the right area. Then choose the time horizon of interest and select a future scenario. For this question, we start with the SSP5 scenario. This socio-economic scenario represents a future situation of conventional developments. We go on as we are. In addition, select the household categories in the drop-down menu right of the map. From the map, we directly see that the situation has changed. The water scarcity risk for poor citizens in Cali and other areas has decreased dramatically to low risk levels. The risk table above the map shows this too. The table also reveals that the risk for non-poor households decreases a bit as well for this future scenario in 2050. The water gap information in the middle part of the dashboard shows that in the future, the water gap and the water gap frequency increase in Cali. Seeing this information, the question arises, why has the risk of the poor households decreased? Interestingly, the tables at the left side of the dashboard and the maps with vulnerability indicators show that the vulnerability of the citizens strongly decreases towards the future for this scenario. This lowered vulnerability results in low risk levels for the citizens of Cali. Despite the increased water gap, in this future scenario, they will have other options to obtain drinking water. When selecting the SSP3 scenario, representing a socio-economic scenario of fragmentation and degradation, we see that the future situation is different. From WaterLOUPE, it can now be observed that the water scarcity risks are high. Similar to the current situation, vulnerability is high. Moreover, the water gap and the water gap frequency have increased, causing an increase of water stress in the Cali watershed, which has a negative effect on the water availability of the citizens. Looking at this information in WaterLOUPE, the Mayor of Cali may request advice. What kind of measures could I take to reduce the water scarcity risk for the citizens of Cali? At the bottom part of the WaterLOUPE dashboard, recommendations are available. By clicking at the bottom Urban, the recommendations specific for municipalities and urban water users can be viewed. The aim here is to provide guidance to stakeholders when developing local solutions to mitigate water scarcity risks. For municipalities and urban water users, this includes recommendations to include the natural resilience of the urban water system, for instance, creating urban water buffers during wet months of the year, and recommendations to decrease vulnerability, such as improving water infrastructure in the city and raising awareness of citizens and other water users. Other recommendations that are provided focus on increasing the water use efficiency and recommendations about water laws and regulations. Thank you for your attention. I hope you found this demonstration of WaterLOUPE informative. Perhaps you already see possibilities to apply WaterLOUPE. If so, please let us know by using the Q&A button on your screen. We think that, besides the use of WaterLOUPE as a knowledge base for stakeholder engagement and public participation, there are more possibilities. For instance, WaterLOUPE can be applied as a template for water scarcity risk assessments at the local scale. Also, WaterLOUPE can be applied to monitor SDG 6 in a scientific and transparent manner to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Also, based on the watershed-specific information and recommendations, Deltares and partners can provide support in the development of practical and situation-specific solutions to reduce water scarcity. And perhaps even more applications are possible. So now that you have listened and watched this webinar, what could be your interest in WaterLOUPE?
Thank you, Dimi. I hope you all have a better idea of what we developed and how it could support you in your work.